Okay, we're going to discuss Chapter 11, Safety Program Evaluation. As in all previous chapters, you should have read the text material first and then review this PowerPoint. Don't depend on one or the other to be your sole source of learning. So the learning objectives. You should be able to describe the purpose for evaluation of the health and safety program, compare the two types of evaluation, process and outcome, explain who has a responsibility for evaluation, describe a recommended frequency for evaluation and the factors that are affecting the frequency. So as an introduction, the time frame for the evaluation will also be goal dependent. Method of evaluation should compare whether the organization is now compared to what it was prior to the program implementation. To be effective, have an understanding of the evaluation process and the measuring of results must be undertaken. And program evaluation is linked in part to Life Safety Initiative 9. So let's review what Life Safety Initiative 9 is. We reviewed this last chapter. It's a life safety initiative. It regards any fatalities, any near misses must be investigated. And why do we investigate them? Not only do we owe it to the person that's had a near miss or a fatality, but we owe it to the future firefighters so that we don't repeat this occurrence. Especially in the wildland arena, many of the multiple loss fatalities on wildland fires have been to the same scenarios. If you look at a picture, most of them were at a draw that led up to a saddle. Firefighters had burning below them, and there's many similarities there. And the question you have to ask yourself is, how do we keep losing people in those circumstances? So that's what this is all about. The evaluation process. There's 3 reasons to evaluate programs. You want to be able to see if the program is effective. Just because you've had a program for 20 years doesn't mean that this program is working. Is it effective? If it's not effective, we need to either change the program or maybe even get rid of the program. Determine the response to the program from the member's perspective. How do they feel about it? Maybe they have an idea to make it better that management hasn't thought of. So you want to find out that. And you want to be able to facilitate program changes. So those are 3 reasons to evaluate programs. And then there's 2 program evaluation types, process and outcome. And we're going to talk about those. The evaluation process. This is where we analyze the procedures of the program and undertake a thorough review of the program. This is going to answer the question, did the processes in the program do what they were intended to do? And then the process evaluation steps. We're determine who was affected by the program. And we're determined to what extent. Who has to be a part of this program? Are improvements occurring as we planned when we first created the program? And then we need to determine the most and least effective parts of the program. So what is working and what isn't working? Again, it doesn't mean we're necessarily going to just drop the whole program, but we need to review it. We need to review it with some different eyes so that what someone created 10 years ago or 20 years ago may no longer be sufficient for the fire service. A perfect example would be report writing. 20 years ago, reports were all handwritten and then they were sent in and they were scanned into a data bank, and that was about the best you could do. Well, nowadays, with all the computer programs we have, with all the tablets we have, there is better ways to do that. Maybe we need to change our program and adapt to it. And this is the evaluating process. And you're going to ask yourself these questions. What part of the program appears the most effective? What is working the best? Are improvements occurring as planned? To what extent were they affected? Who was affected by the program? And which part of the program appears to be least effective? So this is a repeat of what we just said in the last slide. And then the evaluation process, the outcome evaluations. This is measured after the program has been in effect for a while. So typically a year, 5 years, 10 years. And the steps in the outcome evaluation are, you would compare current injury rates and severities to those prior to the program's implementation. Is the program working? We're going to measure the change of knowledge and performance. Are our personnel, are they more knowledgeable now, and is their performance improving? Analyzes the change in the physical environment. Is this program still working in today's environment? An example would be, 20 years ago we didn't have any enclosed cabs on engine companies and truck companies. Well, we do now. So if we had a policy that we created then and we haven't changed it, then obviously we need to look at it because our cabs are different now. And a prime example is 20 years ago, that engineer could look back and could see the firefighters riding backwards behind him. Well, nowadays that engineer most likely, because of the cab configurations, can't even see the firefighters. So you need to have a policy so to make sure that that engineer doesn't take off prior to those firefighters being seat belted in. And then measure the response to policy changes. Are our changes working? Responsibility for evaluations. Everyone should play a role in the process. And if it affects all ranks, then you should have one person from each rank evaluating the process. If you have a safety program manager, this will be the person that oversees the process. This should be their job. Evaluation may be accomplished through a safety committee. You've already had one working. Are they reviewing injuries? Do they see a common thread of where the injuries are? It could be incident safety officers. What are the officers seeing? Because if they're safety officers, they shouldn't be involved in the firefighting. Senior staff members. These are people that, with hopefully more experience, they may be seeing these injuries through a different eye. And then probably the most important, the person that I consider the most important person in the fire station or firehouse is that first line supervisor, typically a captain. They're the ones that run every call with that crew. They see everything day to day, and they're the ones that should be responsible for the evaluations. And then any external evaluation is recommended by NFPA 1500. So as we said before, first line supervisors, they're responsible. They're the feedback providers. They're the ones that, like I said earlier, they're the ones that see the people every day. They're the ones that can give feedback. They can measure attitude and knowledge changes. Now, one thing you have to be cautious about is that when you're doing an evaluation of somebody, you can't write down there that firefighter Smith has a bad attitude, because that doesn't tell you anything. You don't say that. You can't say that. What you could say is that firefighter Smith is not pulling his or her weight. That firefighter Smith, when we come to fires, appears to be winded, appears to be out of shape. Those kind of things you can say. But you can't say that they have a bad attitude. You can evaluate them on their knowledge. And you must have that first line supervisor, fire captain, be the person that receives feedback from his or her crews on our policies and their effectiveness. Are they working? Do we need to change them? And we need to hear from, again, the troops on the streets. Is it working or is it not working? Frequency. This is the most important thing, is you must have set frequencies for evaluations. Process evaluations continually. You must do that. Typically, in most fire departments, personnel receive an evaluation once a year. You must do that, because you can't all of a sudden have someone that the captain comes and tells the battalion chief, oh, my firefighter isn't pulling their weight, they're not doing their job, and then you look at the past evaluations and there is none. Okay, and that's a failure. That's a system failure. That's just not the supervisor's failure. But also that you need to evaluate people honestly on at least a yearly basis, and that's the frequency. You have to do it. Now, if they're a probationary employee, typically they're evaluated for the first 6 months at once a month, and then every 6 months, and until they come off of probation. Frequency of evaluation should be considered dynamic. And what this means is that if you have a firefighter that's off long-term sick, you may not have to do an evaluation on them. Now, what we did at the Pasadena Fire Department is we would still do one every year so that we could always make sure that we had 100% of the employees in evaluation. Now, that evaluation can say is that firefighter Smith is off injured on duty, and it could be as simple as that. But you want to have a document that says that you did evaluate them. You owe that to everybody. Program evaluation is a required component of the safety and health program. You should require that of your health and safety program. That if you put in a new piece of equipment, that you should evaluate that equipment. Is that equipment working the way we intended it to? And have a review period. So, is it safe? Are we putting a piece of equipment in that we determine afterwards that isn't safe? That rarely happens, but it does happen when you start using something to realize this isn't working. And then summary. Remember, there's two basic formats for the evaluation of the program: process evaluation, outcome evaluation. Process evaluation is an ongoing analysis of the program. Outcome evaluations compares results with goals and objectives to determine effectiveness. And external evaluations are recommended.